Good afternoon, and welcome to what I think is the last session of this conference over 2 days. My name's Julian Glover. I'm, among other things, running the 2017 Wolfson Economics Prize, which is a £250,000 first prize for better ideas for running better roads. And I've been talking to a lot of people at the conference. I hope will come forward with entries. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by two of the judging panel and experts on transport, but the judging panel for the prize. Isabel Dedring, who was previously Deputy Mayor of London, working with the last mayor and is now at Arup, and Bridget Rosewell, who is on the board of the National Infrastructure Commission, a commissioner on the commission, but also founded Volterra Economics and is a leading transport economist. So we'll talk a little bit about the aims of the prize and what we're looking for in the competition, but also perhaps a bit about the future of roads and infrastructure. So to start off, maybe a question to each of you. Isabel, what do you think you'll be looking for as a judge in the competition?
Well, I think the whole old school notion of road pricing, which has been rehearsed many times and been tried many times, not only in this country, to roll it out more widely within London, to roll it out across the UK, and if you look at other countries too, New York's tried to roll out congestion pricing. It just hasn't worked, primarily for political reasons. People haven't been able to put together a narrative that really works for politicians or for the public. So I think one thing we need to do is sort of abandon our whole history, rebrand the whole concept in the context of digital technology and a kind of connected road network, and perhaps also in a context of other things that people care more about, which is things like pollution, where people may be more prepared to pay something in order to tackle, for example, poor air quality. So we need to almost abandon the history that we've had on this, I think. But I do think it's politically deliverable if positioned correctly.
Bridget, do you think it's time to look forward? The old ideas are broken.
Well, I agree with everything that Isabel has said, but I think I want to take it actually forward into a different place, because the thing that we know is that there's an awful lot of stuff happening out there with people talking about electric cars, people talking about semi-autonomous or autonomous vehicles, people talking about different ways of delivering freight. All of which may change the sort of mode choices that people are making. People are talking about not having to own your car because you'll just be able to call up and something will arrive and take you to wherever you want to go. And I think what I'm looking for is the kind of reality check on some of those ideas, how we might be taking them forward, how we're going to pay for them, who is going to pay for them. Is this something that everybody in 10 years' time will want to have an electric car for air quality reasons? Which actually leads us to an electricity generation problem. So how is this to be paid for? I'm an economist by background, so I tend to come back to who's going to pay, how are they going to pay, and what are the advantages and disadvantages. But also, in all of that, how do you pay for the unintended bits? So what are the kind of options that you're exploring? What are the options that you could close off with any particular new technology? So that imagination piece is one of the things that I'll be particularly looking for in the ideas that come forward.
Isabel, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's wrong with the current setup? I mean, we're in the NEC, there's roads everywhere, there's lots of transport here. Some people might say the system works fine now, it doesn't need to change. Do you agree?
I mean, when in the mayor's last term, under Boris's second term, we did a piece of work on the sort of road strategy for London. And the fundamental point we were trying to make in that was that if you look at the railways, people are really comfortable talking about HS2, 40 billion pounds, we don't have it, don't worry, that's fine, here's a great idea. On the roads side of the world, nobody talks about 40 billion pound projects or even 4 billion or 4 million pound projects. It all seems to be the level of aspiration, politically at least, and in the public's mind is very low. It's all about fixing potholes and maybe de-bottlenecking some congestion hotspot. Whereas there's no reason why the road network intrinsically should have any less, lower level of ambition and less investment in it. So we looked at the London network, which I'm most familiar with, and we were saying, we probably need about 30 to 50 billion pounds over several decades to really convert London's road network into something fit for the 21st century, not just in movement terms, but also all the things that people want now. They want trees next to the road, cafe culture, cycle lanes, pedestrian crossings, all that kind of stuff. But we know that, we all know that with things like emerging traffic signal technology, you can get more and more out of the road network. You can also do all sorts of funky things with, turning the Hammersmith flyover into the Hammersmith fly under. So there's a lot of stuff that we as an industry could do, but we have to raise the level of ambition. And therefore, if we can say to people, look, you're going to have to pay for the roads differently, but there's a lot more investment that's going to go into the road network, and the road network will become unrecognizably better from what you currently experience on the roads.
The other part of that, of course, is everybody uses roads. Yeah. So not everybody gets on a train, actually, and that's important to remember. They're very valuable for the things they do, but we all use roads, and children use roads, and pedestrians use roads, as well as car drivers, lorry drivers, cyclists and motorcyclists and the rest of it. So I think 1,800 people die on the roads every year. We wouldn't accept that on the railway. I'm on the board of Network Rail. I'd have lost my job by now if we killed those numbers of people. Even when 7 people die on the Croydon tram accident, that is really, really shocking. But 7 people died on the road probably in an hour, but they just died in individual accidents. So there's something I think that we ought to be thinking about as to, are there more effective ways that we could think about the safety stuff, or indeed how you get the very interesting things about making people take more care by making things more difficult, taking away the railings, taking away the traffic lights in urban areas in particular. So as the experiment in the Exhibition Road, which has been very interesting. Should we be is that the way forward for the road network? And then we have, if you like, the high-speed network, which you can only get on with your autonomous vehicle, and you have to pay.
But just getting to the core of sort of what the prize is looking at, is the problem a lack of finance, or is it a lack of ambition? Is it that the money could be there if the road network really thought about some of the exciting projects you had in London?
Yeah, I think it's both. But in my experience, if you look at the railway side of the world, look at the Bakerloo Line extension, Northern Line extension, Crossrail 2, Crossrail 1, these are all projects where the political intention to do something exciting predated the money. Right? So we say, we're a growing city, we need to have these kinds of things to support our growth. It's always talking about the railway network, though. And then we're going to construct an argument economically, and then we're going to construct a funding argument behind it. So to me, the ambition has to precede it, but then you need the funding to go alongside it.
There's no point asking for money until you know what it's going to be for.
Yeah, and I think there's a fundamental issue in the transport industry that people are quite passive, and in infrastructure generally, about the political process, which, by the way, creates 90% of all massive projects in the transport industry come from a political impetus necessarily, because they need legislation, whatever it is. And as an industry, the more that we embrace that and say, actually politics is the way things happens around here. So what's the narrative as an industry that we can put forward that is going to help politicians and the public get on board with the idea of investing more in the road network, which isn't about, you have to pay more tax, but is actually about articulating a vision that people get excited about and are enthusiastic about.
I think that's got to be right, because it's got to be about, these are the 93% of all trips are on roads, whether it's by whatever mode. And you're right, it's very, railways are very important, and people can get behind an individual railway project because you can label it and brand it. Yeah. Whereas with the road thing, it's very much more difficult unless you want to build a new motorway, of course. You could get that and you could brand it, but you would also generate a massive amount of opposition to it. So there's that's part of the tension, it seems to me, that what's the 21st century high-speed road network look like? And does it compete with railways, or do we not want to do that at all? And we could close or make them coach only or autonomous only. And then what's the focus? What's the future of, if you like, the non-intercity network, the urban network? How do you get more children cycling to school? All of those. That is as much the challenge for the 21st century roads as a motorway network.
One thing that struck me at this conference is how separate the road industry, the infrastructure industry is from the car industry or the bus industry. And people talk about separation in rail as a problem, that operators in Network Rail are different organisations. But they're more joined up, it seems, than the road industry or the transport by road industry. I mean, we don't really hear from the car companies. And that might be why politicians are slightly find it difficult to know what the product is, what's the thing they might be championing. Do you think there's a way of changing that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that that I tried to do in London when I was working at City Hall was there was this huge political pressure behind cycling, and as a result, whether you like it or not, a lot of cycling infrastructure is being delivered and has been delivered in London. I mean, £1 billion was found out of nowhere. That was a budget that used to be single-digit millions a year, and it's gone up to hundreds of millions of pounds a year because of the massive political pressure that was put behind that topic. So one of the things I was saying to the cycling lobby and to a few of the other lobby groups is actually if you joined up together and were arguing for a sort of progressive strategy of investing in the road network, you'd be able to get a lot more done. But that just isn't the way people lobby about the roads at the moment. I don't think it's impossible, though, because there are other cities where you do see that and it's much more effective. And it isn't because there's a lack of alignment, because when we did the road strategy in London, it was fascinating. People who were, the car advocates and the cycling advocates and the walking advocates, broadly speaking, they all agreed about what they wanted out of the road network.
But those are the people who are using the infrastructure, if you like. Yeah. I think it is a challenge that we haven't got. We're not joining up with the manufacturers of the product which people are getting into, particularly as the technology in that product changes. So, if everybody wants an electric vehicle, where are they going to plug it in?
Yeah.
If you're in a block of flats, you might have a car park, but is there going to be a socket there that you can put your put the vehicle into, and how will that be charged back to you? How is that going to be related back to your particular way of doing things?
I think I've spoken to the automotive industry about this. We had a sort of round table a couple of years ago when I was in my old job, and I think what's happened is the industry was really burned by all the sort of, a couple of decades ago, cars suddenly became kind of a bad thing, and then the industry was on its knees, and it didn't have money to invest in PR and lobbying and all that kind of stuff. And they have never come back out of that. They're really hiding their light under a bushel, don't participate politically at all in terms of, Westminster and the public debate about these things. But I don't think that's just the behavior they've acquired over several decades. There's no reason why I think they couldn't now seek to reinvent themselves as the solution to pollution problems.
And maybe we can help them break out of that by doing this kind of
exercise.
Because one of the other things that just occurred to me, 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, we have legislation which defines what these things are. There was a row when BMW brought out the 3-wheeler motorbike, and was it a motorbike and did you have to wear a helmet and all that stuff? And I believe in the end they did have to wear a helmet. But electric bicycles are becoming, coming on stream. Is that a bicycle or is it a motorbicycle? Can it go in a cycle lane, or because you can pedal it, or does it have to do something else? And thinking about people who are trying to move forward on how we categorise vehicles and what we mean by a vehicle would also be a really interesting challenge.
How do we stop roads being seen as a sort of negative investment? Politicians like to talk about public transport. They like to talk about high speed too. I wrote speeches for politicians all the time about rail as a positive thing. They're frightened of talking about roads. They remember Twyford Down. They remember protests. They see roads as something that affect the countryside, cause noise, aren't as popular in cities. How does that attitude shift?
Well, all I can say is, I think one of the things we found doing the work that I did in my old job in London was you have to be dealing at all levels. Typically, the level of political interest and engagement as you get to bigger and bigger schemes reduces with roads, at least. And maybe we could make that change and do something different. But whereas you do something like the work that we did at Elephant and Castle, and the community was so behind that, but it wasn't because it was a road scheme. It was because it was changing the nature of that community. It was reducing severance. It was making the roads safer. So I think, in a way, if the roads industry was telling a story that isn't about roads, but is all about, we are the solution to pollution, because we are. Unfortunately, most pollution comes from the road network in most places in the world. We are the solution to road safety. We are the solution to making cities nicer, because 80% of public space in cities is roads. And so the less that the industry talks about it's the thing that it's making, and the more it talks about what it's unlocking, the better.
But I think there's a big distinction which we need to recognise between the big urban areas and what you can do in a big urban area to reduce severance, grass over on top, more underpasses and all those sorts of things, versus the more rural areas and indeed the intercity pieces of this. In rural areas where you've got very great, a lot of distribution of trips, then actually that's a different challenge again, and it's a challenge which buses won't really solve, I don't think, because it's really hard to put enough money into them to make them really effective. And then, of course, we've got the intercity and the motorway network as well. So there's almost, God damn it, that's a bit like the railways, actually. There's the commuter network, there's the intercity network, and then there's the regional railways and the rural and the
But again, if you just...
the social importance.
Yeah, but just, again, look at the railway industry. On those intercity trips and those intercity investments, it's all about increasingly the economic case, which you pioneered. And, that's what the railway industry is now really embracing, that the fundamental argument here is about the economic regeneration that Northern Powerhouse Rail would create or whatever. Roads, forget it. Nobody ever talks about it. It's like roads have no economic impact whatsoever. They're just a way of tackling congestion.
Well,
and that needs to change as well, and maybe the prize can help to unlock that too, which is about what actually is the GVA impact of investing in some of these bigger schemes.
And in fact, what you get is the pushback against roads is, it's the two-way road effect. You invest in a road and golly, people go and use it, and people go in both directions, and it becomes congested, and that's bad because it's no longer free flowing. I've always struggled with that argument. If you've built something and people are using it a lot, is that a bad thing? Now, of course, it may be that you're not costing some of the externalities, whether that takes you back into the road pricing side of things. But the fact you've built something that people actually want and use, that must be producing trips which have value to people. And one of the things we've actually achieved in rail, with the stuff we did around Crossrail that I was involved in, you were too, was to think about this what output is being generated by these trips. Roads hasn't gone there yet, and that's one of the things that we need to change.
Looking ahead, there's a lot of talk about technology. You mentioned it earlier. Do you think it's real? I mean, in 5 years, 10 years, are we going to have electric vehicles everywhere and autonomous vehicles everywhere?
Well, not in 5 or 10 years, but I mean, I think that is the question that nobody can really answer yet. What is the capacity impact of all of this? You get people saying, oh, all these cars are going to platoon up and down the motorway. There's going to be tons of space on the motorway. Well, obviously, if it's that attractive to use, everyone's going to get out of the railway and get onto the roads, and then it's going to be a nice traffic jam, and nobody's going to go anywhere.
Do you think technology is coming?
Oh, technology is definitely coming, and some of it will come faster than we think, and some of it will come more slowly than we think. Semi-autonomous, I think, may actually come probably quite quickly, certainly on all the new cars, but of course there's still a huge tail of old stock. I think that the electric piece is going to really depend on how the infrastructure gets rolled out for it, actually, and how it can be charged for that, the charging infrastructure for the charging of the electric vehicles. But I think my own bet is that the semi-autonomous will come quicker than we think, and the electric may come slower than we think. But I know people who disagree with me, so actually one of the things that I'm really hoping we can get is the ability to explore some of those with this prize, because the economic success of the UK, transport is essential to economics. Without transport, people can't meet, you can't drive a successful economy, you can't access new markets, all of that stuff. So transport is an absolutely key asset, and making sure that we're not closing off the transport development is going to be really important.
And looking ahead, do you think that we're in a sector, roads, transport, is going to see growth? There's endless talk from politicians about infrastructure investment. It's the thing everybody, from Donald Trump to Theresa May, seems to agree on. It's the only thing people seem to agree on. Do you think it's real? Are we going to get more money?
Well, I think in the railway industry, the only way you're going to get more money is by increasingly linking railways to the economic impact that they have in terms of enabling housing, enabling jobs, enabling growth, and actually extracting some of that value and plowing it back into the railways through value capture and other similar tools, business rates, etc. So the question is, how can roads learn from that, which is the way that railways increasingly are funded, not just in this country, but around the world. Everybody's recognizing, hang on a second, why am I paying £100 for this railway, and then the £100 of benefit goes into the pockets of everybody else except me? I'm the government who paid for it. So everyone's recognizing that we have to get those people who are going to benefit to help pay for the railway that's being built. But in the road industry, literally, I think nobody is doing anything like that. So yes, we can get more money, but we've got to reconceive of the impact that roads have and capture more of that impact, in my view.
There's actually two bits of that which are quite important. Firstly, in fact, the taxes generated by road users is well in excess of what we spend on the roads. So that's something to remember. Should we be having a better balance? What is the appropriate balance? The second thing is that there are, at local level, you do get, you can't have your housing, estate unless you put in the roundabout and then widen the access roads, and there's a whole raft of requirements, but it's all at the sort of the small improvement and the marginal change. It's not at the more fundamental change. So I think that there is a willingness to invest in infrastructure, but the mechanisms and the priorities are not yet well thought through. That is certainly something the National Infrastructure Commission is working on as part of the preparation of the National Infrastructure Assessment. We've consulted on some methodologies, we've called for evidence, so there are other places to put your ideas as well as this one, but we're not going to, there's no prize in the Infrastructure Commission, whereas here there's some money involved. And we'll be publishing some responses to those, what comes in the summer of next year, and hopefully that's certainly how you pay for stuff and how you show that it's worth paying for stuff. If it's going to be a general government, if the general taxpayer, all of us collectively are going to pay for something, where is the benefit to us collectively of doing that? Is certainly something that we're looking at, and the value capture, direct value capture or indirect value capture, is definitely part of that. So any ideas in that space, you might get a prize from us, but you won't get a prize from me in the Infrastructure Commission. Sorry, guys.
There's nothing to stop you sending the same entry to both, perhaps. But a final...
do send to both.
A final question for both of you before we all go to the rock concert next door, which is, Isabel, what are the risks ahead? What are the things that we should be watching out for, the dangers?
Well, I don't think this is one of those classic problems that for some reason, road safety has absolutely no political profile. It's something I tried to champion when I did my old job at City Hall. It was extraordinary. Politicians just say, we don't get any letters on it. Nobody votes on that. Nobody cares about it. And as you say, the numbers are extraordinary. Congestion. People just the roads are congested. They're always going to be, everybody complains about it, but they also think that congestion will just continue to exist. And as long as it's within tolerable bounds, it's kind of okay. So it's sort of, where do we get that political focus and a sense of opportunity and burning platform that's actually connected to ambition? The public, I don't think, is there yet. So the thing that I can't figure out is, where is that sort of sense of political will going to come from? In London, where it came from was cycling and pollution. Those were the two topics that gained political traction, and that allowed us to then do a lot more on the roads that was sort of instigated by that, but actually it had nothing to do with cycling. So a huge amount of investment on pedestrian stuff and other things, congestion interventions in outer London, but it was all sort of pegged off of the political pressure behind those two things. So at the national level, where is that going to come from?
That's one big danger, but I think the other one is that there are technological opportunities out there which drive off in different directions and have potentially actually both increasing congestion and decreasing congestion opportunities. But all of them are really important, and the real danger is that we miss the bus and the car and only end up with a train.
And a bicycle, yes.
And a bicycle, yes. And pedestrians. Don't forget pedestrianisation is still a really important element in road use in urban areas, and we ought to be encouraging people to walk more as well. Walking is always worth it.
Well, on the note of the danger of missing the bus and the train, I think we're probably about running out of time. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.